This story kind of flew under the radar, so I'm not sure if you are aware. I don't see a lot of coverage on it so far, but we got to discuss it here. There was a Pentagon official that was just removed from his position because he criticized Israel and he opposed the idea of us sending U.S. troops to fight a war with Iran. I kid you not. Let's bring in this story here. This was breaking news at the time. The U.S. officially removes Colonel Nathan McCormick from his position at the Joint Chief of Staff for posts calling Israel a death cult and saying America is acting as Israel's proxy. First of all, let's give this guy a round of applause. Let's give this guy a round of applause for, in so many ways, being a hero. To state the truth, to state like what he really feels, because at the end of the day, not many people are going to be willing to do it. Let's get into the details of the story. Pentagon official axed after calling Israel death cult, highlighting growing U.S. dissent. Let's get into it. McCormick, he served as the 11th and Egypt branch chief with the Joint Chief of Staff J5 Planning Directorate, a position he assumed in June 2024, tasked with preparing senior U.S. military leadership for engagements with partner nations, including the Israeli regime. Operating a semi-anonymous social media account under the name Nate, McCormick posted extensively about his views, particularly following the events of October 7th, 2023. A Department of Defense Joint Staff official confirmed McCormick's removal, stating his posts do not reflect the position of the Joint Staff or the Department of Defense. So let me just explain something really quick, because we have to ask a question. If he was posting under an anonymous account, how did they find out that was his account? Were they spying on him? Are they watching him? Did they use intel to discover who that account belonged to? He wasn't using his own account. It wasn't his name. It was an anonymous account. So how did they know that that was him? I don't even think they trust their own employees. The matter has been referred to the U.S. Army for further action, and McCormick's social media account has since been deleted. So they deleted his account after that. The colonel's posts documented prior to deletion were sharply critical of Israeli policy and U.S. support. In April 2024, he questioned the fundamental nature of the U.S.-Israel relationship, posting, "I've lately been considering whether we might be Israel's proxy and not realized it yet. Our worst ally. We get literally nothing out of this partnership other than the enmity of millions of people in the Middle East, West Asia, Africa, and Asia." By May, he said Netanyahu and his judo supremacist cronies have prolonged conflict for their own political and territorial goals. His criticism extended to the regime's military actions. McCormick asserted that Israel's responses always, not hyperbole, disproportionately target Palestinian civilians. He also wrote that Israel's goal was to cleanse Eretz Israel of ethnic Palestinians. Again, this is coming from a Pentagon official who obviously saw the writing on the wall. Again, very brave of him to do that. He no longer has this position, but more people have to talk about this. Furthermore, McCormick disclosed operational details, alleging the U.S. warnings to Israel about the risk of invading Lebanon were ignored. Oh, did you guys know about this? And stated that the U.S. Department of Defense, along with other agencies, considered the Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry's casualty figures generally reliable. Now, this goes against everything that we have heard in corporate media. This goes against the data and the information that came from the State Department and that has come from both press secretaries under Biden's administration and Donald Trump's administration. What this goes to show you is that according to McCormick, the Pentagon knew that the numbers that were reported from the health ministry were correct. They also knew that it would be wrong for Israel to go after Lebanon. So they were far aware of all of these things, ladies and gentlemen. So again, like I said, this guy is a hero. McCormick's dismissal, however, is not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a widening rift with American society and political circles, a growing sentiment of the American public weary of vast financial and military resources being extended into support of Israeli actions. Again, it calls out that YouGov poll, which we've shown before on the show, that says only 16% of Americans support U.S. military involvement in a conflict with Iran. So this colonel is a hero. He's the only one that was willing to speak out. And again, you need to ask the question, if his account was anonymous, how did they know it was his account? Which tells me that they had been tracking him. They had been following what he has been doing. Now, I want to show you something else. Speaking of the Pentagon, this is from Aaron Mate. We have to share this video here. One overlooked Trump move that takes on new silence is his ouster this year of General Charles Brown. He was the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. Sound familiar? Okay. In a rare January 2024 interview, Brown signaled that he sought to prevent war with Iran. You guys remember hearing about this guy? I don't think a lot of people saw this. Listen to what he says.
Well, part of our work here is to make sure as things have happened in the Middle East, is not to have the conflict broaden. And so as I provide advice and we think about the approach we take, we want to ensure that we take away capability while we protect our forces, at the same time not have this broaden into a much wider conflict.
When you walk this fine line of not wanting it to escalate, what would you say to those people who are your critics who would say, look, they're not being tough enough on these militants. They're not being tough enough on Iran.
I would also ask, do they want a broader conflict? Do you want us in a full-scale war? And that's the goal, is to deter them. And we don't want to go down a path of greater escalation that drives to a much broader conflict within the region. Well, part of
Okay. And he's gone. So what we are seeing is that Pentagon officials, military officials, we can even say, politicians as well, that have decided to speak out against escalating, war, conflict in the Middle East, they are removed from their position. So what do you see that just happened with Pentagon official McCormick? We also see that this happened with Chairman Brown as well. And I show you this to say this. I think a lot of times it's hard to be positive about what's going on, right? It's very hard. We can have some type of hope, but it's been very difficult. I want you to see that there are people who are speaking up. There are people who are in that, apparatus, that military apparatus that did decide to speak out, and they are gone. And one of the others that has been very vocal, who's been on the show, has been Colonel Larry Wilkerson. And I want you to hear what he said about the Pentagon involving the Iraq War. Listen to this.
And it's unquestionable that the Epstein business was heavily influenced, let me put it that way, by Mossad.
And so that's somehow emblematic on these huge geopolitical issues.
Yes, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon. In 2002, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does. And it's unquestionable that the Epstein.
So everybody hearing what he's saying? Who is really in control here, folks? One more time, we're gonna just jump ahead here.
I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon. In 2002, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad.
In 2002. And then we lead to the war in Iraq, right? So put 2 and 2 together, ladies and gentlemen. There's a video that's floating around somewhere on X. Every now and then it pops up, and it is an interview of Benjamin Netanyahu acknowledging that he controls Congress. That he's like, we controlling all the politicians that are in Congress. We have been infiltrated. And I don't know, people have different opinions about how this government should operate. But I think a lot of us and most of us would say that we do need to put the American people first. And our government has not been doing that. That hasn't happened under Biden's administration. That's not happening right now under Trump's administration. Honestly, that hasn't happened for a long time. I'm trying to think about it, like just the people that I was of age to vote for. It hasn't happened in a long, long time. And I think you can see why. Why is Israeli intelligence infiltrated in the Pentagon? Why are they telling the Pentagon what to do? So no, it's not America first. It's not America first. If you have another country, could you imagine the outrage if it were Vladimir Putin, if it was Russian intelligence that just walked up into the Pentagon and told them what they should and should not do? Could you imagine if it was China, how people would feel? But because it's Israel, everyone is supposed to turn a blind eye. No. Number one, in my opinion, I don't feel like that's security. I don't feel like that's security. Why is this allowed to happen? Everyone should be outraged about that. This is insane. Other countries wouldn't be able to do this, but Israel can. And then we lead to the war in Iraq, right? Where'd that come from? I remember at the time asking myself, why are we going to war with Iraq if the men that were flying the planes for September 11 were from Saudi Arabia? That didn't make any sense to me. The response was Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Okay. What does that have to do with September 11? And there were other people who asked that question as well. Where'd that come from? That came from Benjamin Netanyahu. It was Benjamin Netanyahu who came to Congress and told them that he believed that that he believed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Next thing you know, we're going to war in Iraq, losing American soldiers because Benjamin Netanyahu told us to. Who else does this? And why do we have an allyship with Saudi Arabia? Because if it's really about a threat and who's a threat to America, we weren't attacked by Iran. Do you guys remember this happening? Do people remember Iran attacking us? Does anybody remember us being attacked by Hamas? No, these things didn't happen. But we are buddy-buddy with Saudi Arabia. That's how you know they have been feeding us a crock of BS, ladies and gentlemen.
They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, "Hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does."
Everybody hear that? They just walked right up the stairs. They had access. Why does Israeli intelligence have access to our Pentagon where they can just walk in and walk? Can you just walk into the building and walk up the stairs? No, when you live here. No. And you live here. You know, what's interesting. I feel like Israel's trying to find a way to rebuild its reputation. I don't think that is going to happen ever. I think Israel's reputation is 100% damaged, ladies and gentlemen. They're trying to convince Americans that we need to go to war with Iran. And one of the ways that they're trying to do that is these ads. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu have ads on YouTube trying to convince Americans to go to war with Iran?
Years Iran has produced enough highly enriched.
Why is this on YouTube? Why is Netanyahu speaking to American people on YouTube? This is propaganda. This is propaganda. This is what we're getting on our TVs. Don't believe this. All right? The real terrorist is Netanyahu and Israel. Okay?
Yeah. And notice that Benjamin Netanyahu is speaking in English, which means he's speaking directly to Americans. They're pulling out all the stops. And I'm going to tell you again, kudos to Colonel McCormick, who was willing to stand up and say, no, I don't agree with this. Israel is driving us crazy, you know, and kudos to him for saying that, because the majority of people are not going to do that. They're not going to say that. But no matter what Israel does, they're crying, they're whimpering now. They're saying, oh no, we're under attack. Nobody has the sympathy, fam. The majority of people don't, because we watched you attack civilians for almost 2 years in Gaza. By the way, even though Israel is attacking Iran and Iran is attacking Israel, Israel is still bombing people in Gaza. Did you guys know that? Gazans are still being shot, murdered, bombed, killed, starved, all at the same time. All at the same time. That reputation can never be rebuilt. The damage is done. And now, one of the biggest threats that Israel has is that Americans aren't feeling this, fam. They're not feeling it. You see, in the war in Iraq, we didn't have social media. There was no Facebook. Hell, YouTube wasn't even around yet. There was none of that. So we didn't have like independent media. We didn't have social media. We didn't have any of that. So for most of us, we were only able to see what was presented to us on corporate media, the corporate media outlets, or the newspapers, if you were still reading newspapers at that point. For most of us, that's all we were able to see. What they underestimated this time around, after October 7th, they underestimated the power of people to connect through the interwebs. They underestimated the power of social media. They underestimated the power of independent media, whether on YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, Kick, wherever. They underestimated it. That soldier is a hero for standing up against this and for just keeping it real at this point. Make sure you share this story. When I clip it, make sure you share the story with people, because I don't think a lot of people know about this. And you see, they got rid of him, but he wasn't the only one, and he won't be the last. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.